Hey everyone, it's Nina. In today's video, I'm going to go over Gate 58, the Gate of Joyous, or Gene Key 58. So I'm merging both of these systems together, and I really want to share some breakthroughs and some insights that I have gathered and have been sitting in contemplation with over the past year or so. So you'll have a little bit of understanding of what it's like to have this gate or gene key in your chart or in your gene key sequence, and some things that you might want to look at and start to experiment with yourself and see where this might resonate with you in different areas. So to get started, I'll give you a little bit of a background. So I started exploring Gene Key 58 because it is the core wound in my Venus sequence in the gene keys. And if you're not familiar, what this means is, so your core wound is your unconscious Mars in your human design chart. And it is basically this imprint of wounding that happens when you are in your mother's womb. And this is what you're here to kind of overcome and be able to give back to the whole and be of service to people. And it's actually your sphere of vocation when you move to the Pearl sequence in the gene keys as well. And so in studying this gate or this gene key, it was really confusing to me because in the gene keys, there's three different aspects of a key. So you have the shadow aspect, you have the gift, and you have the city. So these are just different levels within the gene key that operate at different frequencies, and you can kind of go back and forth in between all of these different frequencies at any time. So it's not like you're constantly living in the shadow aspect of this gene key, or you're constantly living in the gift or the city. You can oscillate between all of these. And so while contemplating on this gene key, the shadow is dissatisfaction. And then you have the gift, which is vitality. And then you have the city, which is bliss. And tie it all up together, you're like, wow, this is a really interesting journey because for me personally, it made so much sense when I really got to this sphere to contemplate on as I was going through the Venus sequence. It's the end that you sit in contemplation with and to review the core wound. And it made so much sense because my entire life in the past, I had always just been so dissatisfied with everything in my life because I wanted something to be a certain way. And it was like I had this idea of how I wanted my future to be or how I wanted my life to be. And it was just never enough. Like I got everything that I thought I wanted and it wasn't good enough and I was just never satisfied. And there's always like this underlying feeling of like constantly seeking and things never being good enough. And this is obviously the shadow, this dissatisfaction of this gene key. And you know, Richard Rudd, the person who created Gene Keys, he really talks about how like while this can be rooted in insecurities, and then this can be rooted in an inability to be present, and the shadow aspect of seeking and being dissatisfied can actually be incredibly destructive to a lot of people. It can cause wars, it can cause conflict, it can cause all of these issues because there's just underlying force of being dissatisfied. And it's also something that is incredibly beautiful at the same time, because while it can cause destruction, it's also a driving force for people to improve upon things. This is part of that channel that's connected up to gate 18, this gate of correction. And so when you look at that connection and what the drive is, it's part of the understanding the collective circuit where it's rooted in logic. And so of course, there's going to be this drive to really understand and do things better and to improve upon things. And at the underlying core of all of this is that, or the gift of all of this is, it's not just about you and it's not about the future, which is actually an illusion, something that doesn't even exist. It's actually about being of service to the collective and how we can improve upon things and correct them and make them better so that it can create this more sense of like energy and vitality in order to move things forward and bring joy to the collective and move us to the actual city, which is bliss. And so this is something that I was really confused about because I was like, how do you move from dissatisfaction to the gift of vitality? And upon further contemplation of this, it made me really realize that I was dissatisfied because I was putting all of my joy and my happiness on external things. And so I would go and do things, and then when I didn't have sustained happiness or consistent happiness from going out and doing these things and trying them, like I was just constantly let down and dissatisfied. And that actually, what typically happens with this gene key or this gate is when that happens and you're like, oh, this external reality is not giving me the validation and the happiness and the joy that I was seeking, you turn inward and you go inward and you try to find that joy within yourself. And ultimately, when you go into that space, you eventually come to a place of where it turns from seeking something external to seeking something internal, and then realizing that your drive is actually for the betterment of society and to the collective, to be of service to them and moving society forward. And that is where vitality and energy is birthed from. And so when I really understood that, and something I've been experimenting with and seeing how this is actually shifting me with my own business and how I show up for my clients and how I'm doing my videos and my podcast and why I'm sharing things that I am doing, it's because this is actually where I can have more energy, is when instead of being dissatisfied with my own life or myself and putting the focus on myself and trying to improve me or try to improve what is going to make me happy, it's how can I make things better for this person and how can I help them, have happiness or help them in some way and empower them to find that within themselves and to make things a little bit better for them. And that could be done in an infinite amount of ways. It doesn't have to be through human design or whatever. It can be through projects or through nonprofits or any other thing that's going on out there in the world. So when you look at it from that perspective, you're like, oh, okay. So if I'm feeling really tired and run down, which I was, it was because all of the focus was on me and not being satisfied with myself and not being satisfied with where I was in the present moment. And the problem was I was projecting everything onto a future that didn't exist, because the future doesn't exist until we get to it. But right now, the only thing that exists is the present moment. And if I can't be present and happy in this present moment, then I'm never going to be able to experience that in this future that I'm so desperately seeking and trying to find satisfaction in and trying to find happiness and joy in. And so it was really interesting for me to understand and to see this about myself and how this was really running my life and honestly really tearing down a lot of my relationships and just causing just pure misery for myself all the time, because in my mind it was like nothing was ever good enough. Even when I achieved the next thing or I had the perfect job or the perfect relationship or the perfect location of where I lived, it was just like it provided this temporary high, this external thing, and then I would go back to feeling like this low. And so now that I'm experimenting with shifting to, okay, I'm feeling really tired right now, instead of being like, oh, well, I'm not satisfied with myself right now or where I'm at in my life, I can say, okay, well, the person that I'm choosing to be in this moment is one that is here to be of service to others. And so how can I show up in my business, or how can I show up for my clients that is going to help them and help move society and help them move forward, to make things a little bit different and to mutate and to shift and to change and to move things forward and have there be progress. And so I've been playing around with that with my clients for the last few months, and it's just been something that I've noticed just a shift in that mindset and just that physical energy that I actually have access to in order to channel into that work. And so that was something that I felt like I was able to unlock a little bit with this specific gene key. I like to use these two systems interchangeably, not that they're necessarily the same, but they're both rooted in the I Ching, especially with the line. So depending on which line you have in this gate or this gene key, that's actually something that's important to dive into if you're exploring this gate as well. But I like to explore a little bit more into this because it provides you different perspectives to play around and experiment with and say, does this resonate with me or does this feel right for me? And there's no right or wrong. It's just you could watch this and you can be like, I don't resonate with this at all. Or it could just be planting a seed for you to just become aware of where this might be a pattern in your own life. And so for me, since this is in my unconscious Mars, it's a core wound for me, and how I'm showing up for myself and how I'm showing up for the collective and how it's affecting a lot of different aspects of my life. So this is something that has been really helpful for me to explore. So with it being a 6 line, this is actually something that Ra talks about, how as a 6 line in this specific gate, in gate 58, we're here to experiment. We're here to try out different things for the sake of moving the collective forward, for the sake of doing things different and progressing. But the problem is we're only going to do it for things that we feel are worth doing it for. So if we're going to go and experiment and we think, oh, that's not really going to contribute, or we don't think it's going to go anywhere, then it's not something that I'm going to give my time and my energy to. So with a 6 line, there does need to be some sort of convincing for us to do that. And that is definitely something that I noticed for myself, where I do tend to wait out a lot of things before I do anything, because I need to kind of vouch and say, does it make sense for me to experiment with this? And I gather all of the facts, and it's, like I said, it's part of like that logical understanding circuit in human design. And so for me, I want to understand like all the pieces of something before I give my time and my energy to it and say, is this actually going to move the collective forward? Is this going to expand the consciousness and help us evolve as a collective consciousness? So if you have that line, then maybe that's something that you can look at for yourself as well. I can't speak to the other lines. I obviously don't have those in my chart. So that is the part of human design that I really wanted to go into more detail. So I think this is all that I have to say about this gene key or this gate. It's really, really beautiful. It's something really to sit in contemplation with and say, like, depending on which planet this is in your chart, or maybe you don't have this in your chart, or you notice someone else in your life has this in your chart and you can observe them and see where this plays out. And even if you don't have this in your chart, it is something that's underlying within our DNA that we carry. It just may not be as prominent in this lifetime, but it is something to be aware of like, oh, where might I be a little dissatisfied in my life, and how that might be an unhealthy drive to move or progress things forward. And even just having a subtle shift of saying, I need to perfect this because I'm not happy, and that being your underlying drive, and saying, oh, I'm dissatisfied with this and I want to make it better so that I can be of service to other people. So it's just a simple shift in your mindset and perception of how you really view this, and how you can move from that shadow to the gift. And aspects of the city, I've definitely experienced this. I've experienced bliss in a lot of different moments, especially when I'm very present, when I'm very much in the moment, and I'm just so incredibly happy and just grateful when I'm in those moments. And it's definitely worldly and it's really incredible and beautiful, and I don't know how else to explain it other than that. So it is possible to reach these, the shadow, the gift in the city, and have these different experiences and those different frequencies. And so it's not like a good or a bad thing. It's just, we're just observing ourselves and seeing, oh, okay, I'm sitting in the shadow today. All right, well, how can I shift this to something different? Or you're in the bliss state and you're like, oh, I want to hold on to this, but know that, you may not always be there, and just enjoying it for what it is in the moment. Same with being in the gift. So I really think it's beautiful to have these reflections and see why we do the things that we do in our life, and having this as an explanation, especially something that is in my gene keys in my chart, it really makes things more sense, and it provides more clarity to understand myself more and my driving actions more, and why I do the things that I do. So I hope that this was helpful for you. This is actually something that I really work with my clients on, as far as finding that happiness and that joy within themselves, and having it not be an external thing, and really boosting people's inner joy and confidence surrounding this. It is definitely a mindset shift, and it's something that can be easily implemented, especially over time when you become aware of it. So if you have any questions about this gate, or you have it yourself, I would love to hear in the comments. Feel free to reach out to me at any time. You can also check out my website. I have lots of free resources on there, and on my Instagram, and then also on my podcast. I dive a little bit deeper into human design and gene keys and the other concepts that I talk about on my different episodes. So feel free to reach out to me, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.